Hi, and welcome to the third webinar about the Interreg project Speed You Up. In this webinar, we will talk about working with at-risk NEETs young people. This webinar is the third webinar in the series that we give you an overview of what the project is all about. The first webinar is about Speed You Up project itself. The second webinar was about the support and resources for the coaches. This webinar is about working with at-risk NEET young people. And the last webinar is about how to set up collaborations. In this webinar, we will talk about the working with at-risk NEET young people. It will cover the following items: early school leavers as a problem, how to motivate at-risk NEETs, and how to work with NEET young people. The first topic that we will address is early school leavers as a problem. Let's start with some good news first. When we look at the numbers on early school leaving, we see there has been a decrease for several years now. The Europe 2020 headline target of below 10% early school leaving was reached in several countries, but there are still some countries who find it difficult to get these numbers below the 10% rate, as you can see in this graph. There is also an increase in young people participating in higher education. But there is also other news. There are different drivers that lead to early school leaving. First of all, we have individual factors like gender, socioeconomic background, and families. System-level factors like organization of the school, the way of teaching, and also national-level factors like the current economics, the labor market, and the perception of education in society. All these aspects play an equal part in the decision of students to leave school early, but amongst the individual factors, socioeconomic status has been shown to be a very important one. Students with a lower socioeconomic background tend to leave school more than students with a better socioeconomic background. So it's still a very decisive factor. A direct result of early school leaving is youth unemployment and still being unemployed later in life, which we want to tackle with the Speed You Up program. We see that the percentage of NEET young people is still very high. But why do you want to quit school? We see that students who have financial problems or who have difficult situation going on at home are those who leave school early. This is early school leaving due to a social context or a social problem, and these are aspects which have a huge impact, but also are more structural factors, like the educational system play a role. A lot of pressure is now put on the shoulder of teachers because they are the first line of people who get in contact with the signals pupils might send out wanting to drop out of school. It's a social problem which challenges teachers. Do we stick to our core business, which is teaching and making sure students obtain those curriculum goals? Or do we also provide a safe learning environment, understanding and social support? We know from research that when students are not feeling at ease in a classroom, learning is more difficult. So there seems to be a mismatch between these students and the educational system. Traditionally, we try to solve the mismatch by trying to make the students fit into the educational system. When this does not work, we make sure he or she gets the support he or she needs. We can't seem to help the student if he or she doesn't change or adapt to the system. But what if we tried to change the educational system so all students could fit into it? This is what we see here presented on the figures with the dots and the squares. And this is also what we want to reach and try to do with Speed You Up. We want to try and make a shift in the educational system so all students would benefit from it. How can we motivate at-risk needs? It will not always be easy to motivate young people. Take their context into account when you try to set up an activity and use that to teach them something. They often have a lot of skills that aren't visible in a traditional classroom or outside their context in which they try to survive. Give students responsibility and share responsibility. Create lessons together so they also learn to plan ahead, and they also notice that sometimes things can and will go on. Try to look at the options you have together with your students. Try to get closer to them, closer to their personal life, and be transparent in the things you want to reach. Then, like in the picture, we know that we also will fail at some point, but it's coping with this that makes us stronger and makes the pupils stronger. This is what we know works from former research. If you let students participate, give them responsibility, and take their needs into account, things will work out. Try to involve as many teachers and coaches as possible. Ryan and Daisy told in their self-determination theory that 3 aspects were important: autonomy, relatedness, and competence. Autonomy talks about being yourself and being your own man. Relatedness is feeling connected to others and having a common purpose, like running a business together, which is the core competences that they have to reach in Speed You Up. And the competences itself, experience of mastery and being effective in one's activity. During the Speed You Up program, they will learn hands-on what it is like to start up a business, and this will give the students or the young people a feeling of competence. Sometimes we have problems with motivation. What you can do then is try to make the session as practical as possible. Get someone to come in front of the classroom, like an entrepreneur that inspires them, or a young person who just started up a new business and failed or did not fail. Try to check at the end of every session or every week what students need. How could you help them more? What do they think was difficult? Stress the progress that the group has made instead of focusing on the results. And always start with the relatedness first. Engagement has priority. If students do not feel safe in a classroom, they will not learn as effective. If we go back to the self-determination theory of Ryan and Daisy, the A for autonomy is not for alone. Give students ownership and a say in things. C stands for competence. Step by step, and what is feasible, what can work during the project. Not only problems with motivation can occur, but also problems with emotions. Try to recognize and identify the emotion. Try to figure out what's behind the emotion or the behavior. Did they understand the assignment? Did something happen during the break or at home? Ask a lot, listen, and don't talk too much about yourself. Do students need adjustment in their task? Is something not clear? Do they still have questions? And how do you contribute as a teacher or a coach to this emotion or to this behavior? Finally, we want to talk about working with NEETs. If you look at what NEET young people think about education, then these quotes illustrate what they say. It's too many people, there is a lack of clarity, it is boring, you have to sit and listen too much, it wasn't interesting, there were too many rules, and so on. So it will be important to work with NEETs in a way that they feel like they are offering engaging and relevant activities tailored to their needs. The engaging approach should be considered continuous because the young people are not only hard to reach, they also lose motivation and interest easily. But how can we engage and motivate the ones that are hardest to reach? Several researches show us that different things work. Via respected community members who can recommend the project to a friend, becoming well-known and established in the local community can be engaging, trying to address their specific challenges and needs. And here it is also important to look at a local community to examine what those needs could be. Building an effective relationship, gaining trust of young people through listening in a non-judgmental way, providing activities that are interesting and relevant and as unlike school as possible, so try to do things outside of the box. Speed You Up is a perfect example of that. Designing a good communication plan to identify and mobilize participants. A positive and supportive approach that helps young people to tackle personal and structural barriers can help them to build motivation and self-competence. This is a key to get them back on track. Building a trust relationship is very important, and this asks for a supportive and stimulating approach. Young people benefit from working with designated key people who have an overview over their situation, who are very accessible and approachable, open and positive. This person is preferably part of a network which enables him or her to signpost young people to the services and organizations which can tackle barriers and can help them forward. Co-designing and co-delivering services is also important to deliver tailored solutions. Working with the young people's own goals, for instance, by working with the personal development plan, not to enforce progress on a fixed timescale, but to work towards the own goals and wishes of the young person, and at the same time tackle barriers. Provide enough flexibility by, for instance, working with a light touch trajectory when life gets in the way. We are aware that this is very labor-intensive work. If you can work together with partners who already attract young people, then that's definitely a plus. If you can get youngsters together during an activity or a trajectory or a place where you already gather, then it is easier to reach them than to start from scratch. If we look at motivation of NEET young people, it's not very easy to motivate them into entrepreneuring. But if you work with youngsters that are already entrepreneurial in other ways, like if they are a trainer at a sport club, or they set up all sorts of trades like selling second-hand goods, then you can use those skills. If you give them responsibility quickly, it will not work out sometimes, but it is still worth it, a try. Then you will get them motivated. And also the tailored aspect for NEET young people, as we already said, is quite important. But sometimes life does get in the way, and they are challenged because of negative thinking or of negative behavior with NEET young people. And this is also something that we have to be aware about. Negative thoughts can be about ourselves or about other people, about our situation or society we live in. People often get into the habit of negative thinking when they are living with stress or anxiety, depression, or low self-esteem. NEET young people are often stuck in such a cycle. They need help to get back in the cycle or to break the cycle and give them more mental space to start working on their entrepreneurial and other skills. We all sometimes think in a negative way and we all overthink things, but for certain people, thinking negatively about your surroundings and yourself becomes a cognitive distortion. and their thoughts don't accurately reflect what is going on around the individual, because these thoughts have been there for a long time. They create a certain feeling about themselves or about society, like I'm a failure, I'm weak, the system is not here to help me. And these feelings can create certain behaviors, like withdrawal from society or maybe worse behavior in the classroom. And eventually these behaviors will reinforce the thoughts like all teachers are mad at me, see, I'm no good, and so on. There are advantages for young people not to change or to challenge their thinking, because it is safe for them, it is known to them, they don't have to take any risks, they can stay in their comfort zone, and you avoid trying something different, or you don't have to push yourself. So we have to help them to challenge their negative thinking behaviors in order to be able to develop their entrepreneurial tendencies. How can we as facilitators help these NEET young people? Our first job is to help them identify unhelpful thinking styles. Help them to look what are negative thinking styles I have, and then you can ask them to identify what advantages these thinking styles have for them. To identify the type of thought you have helps you to distance yourself lightly and gain the perspective required to challenge them. Help them to develop their self-awareness of these thinking styles and when they have got in the way. And then you have to challenge them. Help them to practice positive self-talk to change their well-trodden neutral pathways, which is automatically negative pathways of the brain. If you are interested in more resources, or if you want to dig a little deeper into these topics, here you can find some useful resources. So now we've come to the end of this webinar on how to work with at-risk NEET young people. Thank you very much for watching this video. If you are interested in participating in the Speed You Up project, or if you still have any questions concerning this topic, please do not hesitate to visit our website and contact one of the project partners.